Admiral Zephyr's three hearts beat in perfect synchronization as she watched the tactical display aboard her flagship, the Eternal Dominion. The Kythera Empire had ruled the galaxy for over 2 millennia, their military might unquestioned by any species brave enough to challenge them. Their ships were faster, their weapons more powerful, and their tactics refined through countless victories against lesser civilizations. Yet today, something felt different. The human fleet hung in space before them like scattered debris, their ships appearing crude and primitive compared to the sleek, crystalline vessels of the Kythera. Intelligence reports had dismissed humanity as another young species that would fall within days, if not hours. They possessed no advanced energy shields, no quantum weaponry, and their faster-than-light technology was laughably outdated. "How many ships do they have?" Zephyr asked her tactical officer, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had never known defeat. "Approximately 300 vessels, Admiral. Mixed classes, mostly what appear to be converted civilian craft." The officer's mandibles clicked with barely contained amusement. "Their largest ship is roughly 1/3 the size of our smallest destroyer." Zephyr nodded, her scaled hide shimmering under the bridge's bioluminescent lighting. The humans had been expanding into Kythera space for the past few months, establishing colonies on worlds the Empire considered strategically important. When diplomatic warnings failed, military action became inevitable. This battle would serve as an example to other upstart species who might harbor similar ambitions. "Begin the assault. Standard formation Delta 7. We'll crush them quickly and send their remains back to their homeworld as a message." The Kythera fleet moved with practiced precision, their ships flowing through space like a school of predatory fish, energy weapons charged to full power, ready to tear through the primitive hulls of the human vessels. Zephyr had commanded similar engagements dozens of times. The pattern never changed. Overwhelming force, swift victory, minimal casualties among her own forces. But as her fleet closed the distance, something unexpected happened. The human ships didn't flee. They didn't adopt defensive positions. Instead, they began to spread out in a seemingly random pattern, their movements erratic and unpredictable. "Admiral, the enemy fleet is dispersing. They appear to be breaking formation entirely." Zephyr's primary eyes narrowed. In all her years of combat, she had never seen such behavior. Every species they had encountered followed predictable patterns. Either they grouped together for mutual defense or they attempted to retreat. This chaotic scattering made no tactical sense. Are they malfunctioning? Running away individually? Negative, Admiral. They maintain formation integrity within smaller groups, but these groups are moving in different directions. Some are advancing toward us. Others are moving perpendicular to our approach vector. The first exchange of fire came when the leading Kythera vessels entered weapons range. Brilliant streams of plasma and particle beams lanced out toward the nearest human ships. Most found their targets, sending explosions blooming across the void. But the humans didn't respond as expected. Instead of returning fire immediately, they continued their strange dance, weaving between the Kythera ships like insects around a predator. Their weapons, when they finally fired, seemed almost primitive. Simple projectile weapons and basic energy beams that barely scratched Kythera armor. "This is almost insulting," muttered her weapons officer. "Their technology is centuries behind ours." But Zephyr felt a growing unease. Something about this engagement felt wrong. The humans were taking losses, yes, but not at the rate they should have been. Their erratic movements made them difficult targets, and their smaller ships could change direction faster than Kythera vessels could track. Minutes passed, and the battle began to shift in subtle ways. Human ships that had seemed to flee suddenly reversed course, striking at Kythera vessels from unexpected angles. Groups that had scattered wide began to converge on isolated enemy ships, overwhelming them through sheer numbers rather than superior firepower. "Admiral, we're losing more ships than projected," her tactical officer reported, his voice tight with confusion. "Their coordination appears more sophisticated than initially assessed." Zephyr studied the tactical display with growing alarm. The humans weren't just fighting randomly. There was a pattern to their chaos, a method to what had seemed like madness. They were using their inferior technology in ways the Kythera had never encountered. "How are they coordinating these movements? We're not detecting any command frequencies." "Unknown, Admiral. Our communications intercepts show only brief encrypted bursts between vessels." As the battle continued, Zephyr began to understand what she was witnessing. The humans weren't fighting like any civilized species. They weren't following established military doctrine or accepted tactical principles. Instead, they were improvising, adapting, changing their approach moment by moment based on immediate circumstances. Her ships, magnificent as they were, had been designed for conventional warfare against conventional enemies. Their weapon systems, targeting computers, and tactical protocols all assumed opponents would behave in predictable ways. The humans' complete disregard for military tradition was turning the Kythera's own strengths against them. Admiral, the enemy appears to be learning. They're adapting to our weapons patterns faster than our computers can compensate. Zephyr's blood ran cold. Learning during battle was supposed to be impossible. Combat moved too quickly for real-time tactical evolution. Yet the humans seemed to be doing exactly that, turning each exchange of fire into a lesson that informed their next move. A proximity alarm sounded as a group of human ships suddenly accelerated toward the Eternal Dominion. They were on what appeared to be a collision course, their inferior weapons blazing. Zephyr's crew responded according to protocol, bringing defensive systems online and returning fire. But the humans weren't trying to ram her flagship. At the last possible moment, they veered away, their attack run serving as a distraction while other human vessels struck at the fleet's flanks. It was a feint within a feint, a level of tactical deception that required split-second timing and perfect coordination. "This is impossible," Zephyr whispered, watching her supposedly superior fleet being steadily worn down by ships that shouldn't have posed any threat. "How are they doing this?" Her communications officer looked up from his station, his expression troubled. "Admiral, I'm detecting something unusual in their transmissions. The encrypted bursts aren't just tactical data. They're sharing everything. Weapons effectiveness, evasion patterns, targeting solutions. Every ship that learns something immediately shares it with every other ship." The revelation hit Zephyr like a physical blow. The humans weren't just coordinating their fleet, they were turning it into a single learning organism. Every mistake became a lesson for the entire force. Every successful maneuver was instantly replicated across hundreds of vessels. As another Kythera destroyer exploded under concentrated human fire, Zephyr realized she was witnessing something that would change galactic warfare forever. The humans had found a way to make their greatest weakness, their technological inferiority, irrelevant through sheer adaptability and unprecedented cooperation. The battle was far from over, but already she knew that nothing would ever be the same. Captain Sarah Chen gripped the armrests of her command chair as the new horizon shuddered under enemy fire. Around her, the bridge crew worked with calm efficiency that belied the chaos of battle raging outside. Through the main view screen, she could see Kythera ships moving like glowing predators through the starfield, their weapons painting deadly auroras across the void. "Damage report," she called out, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "Hull breach on Deck 7 sealed. Shield generators holding at 60%. Weapon systems operational." Her tactical officer, Lieutenant Torres, barely looked up from his console as he spoke. "The enemy's plasma weapons are more powerful than we anticipated. But their targeting systems seem to have trouble with our evasive patterns." Sarah nodded, her mind already processing the information and preparing to share it with the fleet. This was what made humanity different. Not their technology or their firepower, but their ability to learn and adapt in real time. Every piece of data her ship gathered would be instantly transmitted to every other human vessel in the fleet. Communications broadcast our evasion effectiveness data to all ships. Pattern designation Echo 7 appears to reduce hit probability by 32% against Kythera plasma weapons. Transmission sent, Captain. We're also receiving updates from the Defiant and Courage. They've identified optimal firing solutions for concentrated attacks on Kythera destroyer-class vessels. The human fleet had entered this battle knowing they were outgunned and outmatched. But Admiral Rebecca Martinez, commanding from the converted cargo hauler Unity, had implemented a strategy that no other species had ever attempted: real-time collective learning. Every ship was both student and teacher, sharing every scrap of tactical intelligence the moment it was discovered. Sarah watched as her helmsman executed a series of seemingly random course changes, each one based on data collected from dozens of other ships' encounters with enemy fire. The Kythera ships, magnificent as they were, couldn't adapt fast enough to counter moves that were being invented and perfected, second by second. Captain, incoming transmission from Admiral Martinez. Put her through. Admiral Martinez's face appeared on the secondary screen, her expression focused but calm. Behind her, Sarah could see the bustling activity of the Fleet Command Center that had been hastily installed in the Unity's cargo bay. Sarah, we're seeing something interesting in the Kythera formation patterns. They're maintaining rigid command structures even under pressure. Their ships respond to orders from flagships, but there's a delay in adaptation when those flagships are engaged or destroyed. Sarah immediately understood the implications. They're not sharing information the way we are. Each ship or squadron operates independently. Exactly. We're going to test something. I want you to take your squadron and demonstrate our new evasion patterns directly in front of their command ship. Make them think they've figured out our movements. Meanwhile, Chen's squadron will be implementing completely different patterns developed by the Outer Rim ships. Understood, Admiral. We'll give them a textbook to study while everyone else improvises new chapters. The plan was audacious in its simplicity. While the Kythera fleet's attention was focused on learning to counter one set of human tactics, the rest of the human fleet would be developing entirely new approaches. By the time the enemy adapted to what they were seeing, those tactics would already be obsolete. Sarah's squadron moved into position, their ships performing the carefully choreographed dance of evasion patterns that had been proven effective in earlier engagements. The Kythera flagship, the massive Eternal Dominion, turned its attention toward them, its weapon systems tracking their movements with increasing accuracy. They're learning, Torres observed, watching the tactical display. Enemy hit probability is increasing with each pass. Perfect. That's exactly what we want them to do. While Admiral Zephyr's fleet focused on Sarah's squadron, the other human ships were implementing entirely different tactical innovations. Lieutenant Commander Jackson, commanding the destroyer Phoenix, had discovered that rapid acceleration changes could overload Kythera targeting computers for brief moments. The corvette Stinger had found that their primitive missiles, while easily intercepted, could mask the signatures of ships maneuvering behind them. Most importantly, every discovery was instantly shared across the entire fleet. The human ships weren't just fighting individually. They were functioning as a single, evolving organism. Each engagement taught them something new, and each lesson was immediately applied by hundreds of other vessels. The Kythera, meanwhile, remained locked in their traditional command structure. When a squadron developed an effective counter to human tactics, that knowledge stayed within that squadron until formal reports could be transmitted up the chain of command and new orders distributed. By the time those orders reached other parts of their fleet, the humans had already moved on to new approaches. Sarah watched her tactical display as the battle evolved around her. Human ships that had appeared doomed minutes earlier were now dancing between enemy fire with increasing confidence. The collective learning was accelerating, each successful evasion or attack run adding to the growing database of tactical knowledge. Captain, we're receiving new data from the Dauntless. They've discovered that Kythera shield harmonics can be disrupted by synchronized firing patterns from multiple ships. How many ships do we need for effective disruption? Minimum of 4, optimal effectiveness at 7 ships. Sarah smiled grimly. The Kythera had superior shields, better weapons, and more powerful ships. But they fought as individuals, each captain relying on his own experience and training. Humans fought as a collective intelligence, each mind contributing to a sum greater than its parts. All ships, this is New Horizon, were implementing synchronized fire pattern Delta 9. Target designation, Kythera Heavy Cruiser bearing 27 Mark IV. Firing sequence begins in 30 seconds. Across the battlefield, 7 human ships adjusted their positions with mechanical precision. They were different classes, different sizes with different weapon systems, but they moved with the coordination of a single entity, their targeting computers linked through instantaneous communication channels. The synchronized attack struck the Kythera cruiser's shields like a perfectly tuned hammer blow. Energy cascaded across the alien vessel's defensive barriers, creating interference patterns that disrupted the entire shield matrix. For just a few seconds, the cruiser was vulnerable. Those few seconds were enough. Follow-up attacks from other human ships found gaps in the faltering shields, sending torrents of fire into the cruiser's hull. The massive vessel, which should have been able to withstand hours of concentrated bombardment, found itself crippled in moments. Target neutralized, Torres reported with satisfaction. Shield disruption pattern confirmed effective, transmitting refined targeting data to all ships. Sarah felt a surge of pride as she watched the information spread through the human fleet like wildfire. Within minutes, groups of human ships across the battlefield were implementing variations of the same tactic. The Kythera, still trying to adapt to the evasion patterns her squadron had demonstrated, found themselves facing an entirely new form of attack. But the real revelation was yet to come. As Sarah studied the tactical display, she began to notice something unexpected. The human ships weren't just learning how to fight the Kythera more effectively. They were learning how to fight together in ways that transcended anything human, military doctrine had ever envisioned. Ships that had never served together before were coordinating complex maneuvers with split-second timing. Captains who had met only in pre-battle briefings were anticipating each other's moves with uncanny accuracy. The shared tactical network wasn't just transmitting data. It was creating a new form of military consciousness. "Captain," her communications officer called out, voice filled with wonder. "I'm seeing something unprecedented in our tactical network. The ships aren't just sharing information. They're beginning to think collectively. Decision-making processes are accelerating beyond individual human capabilities." Sarah stared at the tactical display, watching as patterns emerged that no single human mind could have conceived. The fleet was evolving during battle, becoming something entirely new. And across the void, she could see the Kythera fleet beginning to falter as they faced an enemy that grew stronger and smarter with each passing moment. The humans had stumbled upon something that would change not just this battle, but the nature of warfare itself. Admiral Zephyr's claws scraped against her command throne as another Kythera destroyer vanished in a brilliant explosion. The tactical display showed a battlefield that defied everything she understood about military science. Her superior fleet was being systematically dismantled by primitive vessels that should have been space debris hours ago. "Status report," she demanded, her voice carrying the edge of desperation she fought to suppress. "We've lost 37 vessels, Admiral. The humans have lost approximately 80 ships, but their remaining forces are demonstrating increased combat effectiveness with each engagement." Her tactical officer's normally steady voice wavered with confusion. "Their learning curve is beyond anything in our combat databases." Zephyr studied the holographic display floating before her command station. The human ships moved like a swarm of intelligent insects, each vessel responding to threats with reactions that seemed impossible for individual crews to coordinate. When her ships developed counters to human tactics, those counters were somehow anticipated and neutralized within minutes. How are they sharing information so quickly? Our intelligence indicated human communication technology was primitive. We're detecting quantum encrypted data bursts between all human vessels, Admiral. The encryption is basic, but the volume of information being transmitted is staggering. They appear to be sharing everything. Sensor data, tactical solutions, weapon effectiveness reports, even individual crew observations. The implications struck Zephyr like a physical blow. The humans weren't just coordinating their fleet. They were creating a collective military intelligence that learned from every mistake and shared every insight instantaneously. Her own forces, bound by traditional command structures and communication protocols, couldn't compete with such rapid adaptation. "Admiral, incoming priority transmission from the Kythera High Command." The image of Grand Admiral Vorthak appeared on her communications screen, his ancient features bearing the weight of 2,000 years of unquestioned military supremacy. His scaled hide bore the ceremonial scars of countless victories, and his eyes held the cold calculation that had conquered half the galaxy. "Zephyr, explain why a primitive species is destroying my fleet." "Grand Admiral, the humans are employing unprecedented tactical coordination. Their ships function as a single learning entity rather than individual vessels. Every engagement teaches their entire fleet simultaneously." Vorthak's expression darkened. "Impossible. No species has achieved real-time tactical integration on this scale. Our own research into collective consciousness warfare concluded it was theoretically unachievable. Nevertheless, Grand Admiral, that appears to be exactly what we're facing. I request permission to withdraw and regroup. We need time to develop countermeasures." "Denied. The Kythera Empire does not retreat from inferior species. Adapt your tactics, Admiral. Find a way to win." The transmission ended, leaving Zephyr alone with an impossible order. Around her, the bridge crew continued their duties with professional efficiency, but she could sense their growing uncertainty. For the first time in their lives, they were witnessing Cathara military superiority being challenged. On the main tactical display, she watched a group of human vessels execute a maneuver that should have been suicidal. 7 small ships accelerated directly toward a Cathara battlecruiser, their primitive weapons blazing. Traditional doctrine would have called it a desperate last stand, but Zephyr had learned to expect the unexpected from these strange beings. The human ships didn't ram the cruiser as anticipated. Instead, they performed a complex weaving pattern around the larger vessel, their combined fire creating overlapping zones of destruction that somehow penetrated the cruiser's shields. The Cathara ship, designed to withstand frontal assaults from comparable vessels, found itself overwhelmed by attacks coming from multiple vectors simultaneously. How did they calculate those firing solutions? Zephyr demanded. The mathematical complexity should have required hours of computational analysis. Unknown, Admiral. But we're detecting similar coordinated attacks throughout the battlefield. The humans appear to be implementing the same tactical innovation across multiple engagement zones simultaneously. Zephyr watched in growing horror as the pattern repeated across her fleet. Human ships that discovered effective tactics instantly shared them with every other vessel in their fleet. What had been individual ship-to-ship engagements became coordinated actions by dozens of vessels working in perfect harmony. Her own fleet, meanwhile, remained locked in traditional patterns. When one squadron developed an effective counter to human tactics, that knowledge remained isolated until it could be formally transmitted through proper channels. By the time new orders reached other squadrons, the humans had already adapted to neutralize whatever advantage the Cathara had briefly gained. Admiral, I'm receiving reports from multiple fleet commanders. They're requesting permission to implement non-standard tactical approaches. Denied. We will maintain proper military protocol. Begin implementing tactical pattern Omega-7 across all vessels. But even as she gave the order, Zephyr knew it was futile. Omega-7 was designed for conventional warfare against conventional opponents. The humans had thrown conventional warfare out the nearest airlock and replaced it with something entirely new. Minutes passed as her fleet attempted to implement the new tactical pattern. Ships moved into formation with practiced precision, their crews executing maneuvers they had drilled thousands of times. But the humans adapted to the new formation faster than it could be fully deployed. They're reading our tactical intentions, her strategic advisor reported with barely concealed panic. Every formation change is anticipated and countered before we can achieve optimal positioning. Zephyr's primary eyes fixed on the tactical display as the truth became undeniable. The humans weren't just learning from their own experiences, they were learning from Cathara behavior patterns. Every ship movement, every weapons deployment, every tactical decision was being analyzed and fed into their collective intelligence network. They're using our own predictability against us, she whispered, the words tasting like defeat. Her communications officer looked up from his station, his expression troubled. Admiral, we're detecting something else in their transmissions. The data sharing isn't just tactical information anymore. They're sharing emotional states, command decisions, even individual intuitive insights. The revelation hit Zephyr like ice water in her veins. The humans had achieved something the Cathara had always believed impossible. True collective consciousness in battle. Each human captain was drawing on the experience and intuition of every other human in the fleet. They were fighting not as individuals but as a single distributed intelligence. How many minds are they linking? Based on ship counts and crew complements, approximately 40,000 individual humans are sharing real-time battlefield awareness. 40,000 minds working as one. 40,000 perspectives contributing to every tactical decision. 40,000 sources of creativity and adaptation, functioning as a single military organism. Against such an entity, traditional military doctrine was not just inadequate, it was obsolete. Zephyr watched as another wave of coordinated attacks swept across her fleet. Human ships that had been scattered across the battlefield suddenly converged on isolated Cathara vessels with perfect timing. The attacks came from every direction simultaneously, each one informed by the collective experience of the entire human fleet. Her own ships, magnificent though they were, fought as individuals guided by centuries-old tactical doctrine against an enemy that evolved with each engagement. Such rigid thinking was becoming a fatal weakness. Admiral, we're detecting massive energy signatures from the human fleet. They appear to be attempting something unprecedented. On the tactical display, Zephyr could see every human ship in the fleet adjusting its position simultaneously. They moved with a coordination that defied physics, as if guided by a single vast intelligence. Whatever they were planning, it would be unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. For the first time in her career, Admiral Zephyr felt genuine fear. The humans were about to demonstrate their ultimate innovation, and she suspected it would change the nature of warfare forever. Her fleet, for all its technological superiority, was about to face an enemy that had transcended the limitations of individual consciousness. The galaxy would never be the same. Dr. Elena Vasquez barely noticed the explosions blooming across the view screen as she hunched over her specialized console aboard the Unity, while the rest of Admiral Martinez's command staff coordinated the battle. Elena monitored something far more significant than tactical displays or weapon systems. She was watching the birth of a new form of consciousness. "Admiral, the neural integration is exceeding all projections," she called out, her voice filled with equal parts excitement and concern. "We're seeing synchronization patterns that shouldn't be possible with our current technology." Admiral Martinez turned from the tactical hologram, her weathered face creased with concentration. "Explain it to me in terms I can understand, Doctor. What exactly is happening to our people?" Elena's fingers danced across her interface, pulling up displays that showed the miraculous transformation occurring throughout the human fleet. "When we designed the tactical sharing network, we expected simple data exchange, weapon effectiveness, enemy movements, successful maneuvers. But the human brain is far more adaptable than we anticipated." She gestured to a complex graph showing neural activity patterns from across the fleet. "The crews aren't just sharing information anymore, Admiral. They're sharing intuition, tactical instincts, even emotional responses to combat situations. 40,000 human minds are beginning to function as a single distributed intelligence." "Is it safe?" Martinez asked, though they both knew the question was academic. The battle was too far advanced to change course now, and the tactical advantage was too overwhelming to abandon. "We're in uncharted territory," Elena admitted, "but preliminary readings suggest no permanent neurological damage. The human brain seems naturally suited for this kind of collective processing. We're seeing enhanced pattern recognition, accelerated decision-making, and tactical innovations that no individual mind could have conceived." Across the fleet, the transformation Elena described was manifesting in ways that defied conventional understanding. Captain Rodriguez of the destroyer Valiant found himself anticipating enemy movements with uncanny accuracy, his tactical decisions informed by the collective observations of hundreds of other officers. Lieutenant Shaw, manning the weapons console of the Corvette Defiant, was calculating firing solutions that incorporated data from across the entire battlefield instantaneously. "Dr. Vasquez," came a voice from the communications station. "We're receiving reports from ship's medical officers throughout the fleet. They're documenting enhanced cognitive function across all crew members. Reaction times improved, pattern recognition increased, stress responses optimized." Elena nodded, her excitement growing despite the dangers surrounding them. "The network isn't just sharing data. It's creating a genuine collective consciousness. Each human brain is contributing its unique perspective while benefiting from the enhanced capabilities of the whole." On the main tactical display, the results of this transformation were becoming impossible to ignore. Human ships moved with a coordination that seemed choreographed by an intelligence far greater than any individual commander. Complex maneuvers involving dozens of vessels were executed with split-second timing, each ship knowing exactly where every other ship would be at any given moment. Admiral Martinez watched as 3 squadrons of human ships converged on a Kythera battle group from different vectors simultaneously. The timing was perfect, the execution flawless. But what impressed her most was that no single commander had planned the maneuver. It had emerged organically from the collective tactical consciousness of the fleet. "Admiral," her tactical officer called out, "the Kythera are attempting to adapt to our coordination patterns. They're trying to predict our movements based on observed behaviors." "Let them," Martinez replied with grim satisfaction. "They're trying to counter the actions of individual ships, but we're not fighting as individuals anymore." The truth of her words became apparent as the battle continued. The Kythera, despite their technological superiority, remained bound by traditional command structures. Orders flowed down from flagships to squadrons to individual vessels, creating delays that the rapidly adapting human fleet exploited ruthlessly. Elena watched her monitors as the collective intelligence strengthened with each passing minute. "Admiral, we're seeing something remarkable. The network is developing its own tactical innovations. Strategies that no human commander ever conceived are emerging from the collective consciousness." One such innovation was manifesting at that very moment. Across the battlefield, human ships began executing a maneuver that had never appeared in any military textbook. Small groups of vessels started accelerating toward seemingly random points in space, their movements appearing chaotic and uncoordinated to outside observers. But Elena could see the pattern emerging on her displays. The ships weren't moving randomly. They were positioning themselves in a three-dimensional web that would trap a significant portion of the Kythera fleet. No single human mind could have calculated the complex mathematics required for such a maneuver. But 40,000 minds working in perfect harmony made it possible. "Magnificent," she whispered, watching as the trap began to close around the enemy vessels. The Kythera found themselves surrounded by human ships that had appeared to be retreating or fleeing. What had seemed like random movements suddenly revealed themselves as the components of a vast tactical web. Enemy vessels that had been pursuing isolated human ships discovered they were flying into carefully prepared killing zones. "How did they coordinate this?" Admiral Martinez asked, staring at the tactical display in amazement. "They didn't," Elena replied. "At least not in any traditional sense." The collective consciousness perceived the optimal solution and guided the fleet toward it without any centralized planning. Each ship knew intuitively where it needed to be. The Kythera fleet, caught in the expanding web, began to panic. Their rigid command structure couldn't adapt quickly enough to the constantly shifting tactical situation. Orders became outdated before they could be transmitted, and individual ship commanders found themselves facing decisions their training had never prepared them for. But the most significant development was yet to come. Elena's monitors began detecting something unprecedented in the neural patterns flowing through the human network. The collective consciousness wasn't just responding to immediate tactical situations. It was beginning to predict enemy behavior with supernatural accuracy. "Admiral, the network is developing precognitive capabilities, not supernatural precognition, but tactical prediction based on processing vast amounts of behavioral data in real time." Elena pulled up a detailed analysis of the phenomenon. 40,000 human minds analyzing every movement, every decision, every tactical choice the Kythera make. The collective is identifying patterns so subtle that no individual could perceive them, then using those patterns to predict enemy actions minutes before they occur. The practical results were devastating for the Kythera. Human ships began moving to counter enemy maneuvers before those maneuvers were even initiated. Tactical formations dissolved as their intended targets disappeared from their projected positions. Weapons fired at coordinates where human ships should have been, only to find empty space. "They're seeing the future," Martinez said in wonder. "Not the future," Elena corrected. "They're seeing the logical consequence of present actions with perfect clarity." The collective intelligence can process so much information simultaneously that enemy behavior becomes predictable down to the second. Admiral Zephyr, watching her fleet being systematically destroyed by an enemy that anticipated her every move, was beginning to understand that she faced something beyond military science. The humans had achieved a form of consciousness that transcended individual limitations, creating a tactical intelligence that operated on a level her species couldn't comprehend. Elena looked up from her displays, her face pale with the magnitude of what she was witnessing. "Admiral, we need to consider the implications of what's happening here. This isn't just a new military tactic. It's the emergence of a new form of human consciousness. When this battle ends, we won't be the same species we were when it began." Martinez nodded grimly, understanding that they had crossed a threshold from which there could be no return. The human fleet had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a collective intelligence capable of learning, adapting, and evolving in real time. And across the void, their enemies were learning that technological superiority meant nothing against an opponent that could rewrite the rules of warfare with every passing moment. The battle was entering its final phase, but the real war, the war for the future of consciousness itself, was just beginning. The Eternal Dominion shuddered as another coordinated human attack overwhelmed her port shields. Admiral Zephyr gripped her command throne, watching helplessly as her supposedly invincible flagship suffered damage that should have been impossible. Around her, the bridge crew worked with increasing desperation, their movements sharp with barely contained panic. Structural integrity at 70% and falling, her damage control officer reported. The humans are targeting specific weak points in our hull design. They somehow know exactly where to strike for maximum effect. Zephyr stared at the tactical display, where her remaining ships were being systematically eliminated by an enemy that fought like no species in recorded galactic history. The humans moved with supernatural coordination, each vessel anticipating not just enemy actions but the actions of every other human ship in the fleet. "They're reading our intentions before we act on them," she muttered, watching as her tactical formations dissolved under attacks that arrived precisely where they would be most effective. How is this possible? Her strategic advisor, a veteran of countless campaigns, looked up from his analysis console with haunted eyes. "Admiral, I've run every tactical algorithm in our databases. The humans are operating beyond the theoretical limits of military coordination. They're not just sharing information, they're sharing consciousness itself." The implications of those words hung in the air like a death sentence. The Kythera Empire had ruled the galaxy through superior technology and refined military doctrine. But the humans had found a way to transcend the limitations that bound all other species, creating a form of collective intelligence that made traditional warfare obsolete. "Admiral, incoming transmission from the human fleet commander." Zephyr straightened in her command chair, drawing on millennia of Kythera military pride. "Put it through." Admiral Martinez appeared on the main screen, her weathered face calm despite the chaos of battle surrounding her. Behind her, Zephyr could see crew members working with fluid efficiency, their movements synchronized in ways that suggested shared awareness. "Admiral Zephyr, I'm offering you the opportunity to surrender." The words hit Zephyr like a physical blow. No one had ever offered surrender terms to a Kythera fleet commander. The very concept was alien to a species that had never known military defeat. "You would dare offer terms to the Kythera Empire?" Zephyr's voice carried centuries of imperial arrogance, but she could hear the uncertainty creeping in around the edges. "I'm offering you survival," Martinez replied calmly. "Your tactical databases are undoubtedly recording everything that's happening here. You know as well as I do that this battle is over. The only question is whether your remaining crew members live to see its conclusion." Zephyr glanced at her tactical display, where the stark numbers told a story of inevitable defeat. She had begun the battle with 800 vessels. Fewer than 200 remained operational, and those were being eliminated at an accelerating rate as the human collective intelligence refined its tactics. "This is impossible," she whispered. "Your ships are primitive. Your weapons are outdated. Your technology is centuries behind ours. Technology isn't everything, Admiral. You're fighting 300 ships. We're fighting as one mind with 40,000 perspectives. Every engagement teaches us something new. Every mistake becomes a lesson shared by our entire fleet. You can't adapt fast enough to counter an enemy that evolves during battle." The truth of those words was undeniable. Zephyr had watched her own tactical innovations become useless within minutes as the humans adapted to counter them. Traditional military doctrine assumed enemies would respond predictably to tactical changes. The humans changed the rules faster than the rules could be applied. "What are you?" Zephyr asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're what happens when individual consciousness decides to become something greater," Martinez replied. "Your species fights as separate entities guided by central command. We fight as a single entity with distributed awareness. The difference is not just tactical, it's evolutionary." On her tactical display, Zephyr watched as the human fleet began to converge on her position. But they weren't moving to attack. Instead, they were forming a defensive perimeter around the remaining Kythera ships, their weapons powered down but ready. "You're preserving us," she realized with shock. "We're preserving the crews who survive," Martinez corrected. "This battle has taught us that consciousness itself can evolve under the right conditions. We're curious to see if other species can achieve what we've achieved." The offer hung in space between them, as revolutionary as the tactical innovations that had defined the battle. The humans weren't seeking conquest or destruction. They were offering partnership in something unprecedented in galactic history. Zephyr turned to her tactical officer. What are our options? None, Admiral. Our remaining vessels cannot hope to break through their defensive formation. They've positioned themselves to counter every possible escape vector. But even as he spoke, Zephyr realized the humans weren't trying to trap her fleet. They were protecting it. The defensive formation was designed to prevent her ships from fleeing into situations where they would be destroyed piecemeal. The humans had achieved total tactical victory and were using it to preserve enemy lives. Why? She asked Martinez. Why preserve an enemy that came to destroy you? Because you're not really our enemy, Martinez replied. You're representatives of a form of consciousness that we're rapidly outgrowing. But consciousness is precious regardless of its form. Every mind has value. Every perspective contributes something unique. Zephyr felt something she had never experienced in centuries of military service. Humility. The humans had not just defeated her fleet. They had transcended the very concept of traditional warfare. They fought not to destroy but to evolve. They conquered not to dominate but to understand. If I surrender, what happens to my people? They're invited to observe what we've become. Some may choose to join the collective consciousness we're developing. Others may prefer to return to the Empire with first-hand knowledge of what they've witnessed. The choice will be theirs. Around the bridge, Zephyr's crew listened to the exchange with expressions of wonder and confusion. They had entered battle expecting easy victory over a primitive species. Instead, they were witnessing the birth of something that transcended their understanding of consciousness itself. Admiral, her communications officer called out, I'm receiving surrender requests from 17 of our remaining ships. Their commanders are requesting permission to accept human protection. Zephyr closed her eyes, feeling the weight of history pressing down upon her. She was about to make a decision that would echo through the galaxy for millennia to come. The Kythera Empire's era of unquestioned dominance was ending, but something far more significant was beginning. Admiral Martinez, she said finally, I accept your offer, but I have one condition. Name it. I want to understand what you've become. I want to experience this collective consciousness you've created. Martinez smiled, and for a moment, Zephyr thought she saw something vast and warm and infinitely complex looking back at her through human eyes. Welcome to the future, Admiral Zephyr. We have so much to show you. As the Eternal Dominion powered down her weapon systems, Zephyr realized she was witnessing something that would transform not just military tactics, but the very nature of consciousness in the galaxy. The humans had discovered something that would make all previous forms of civilization seem primitive by comparison, and they were willing to share it with former enemies. The battle was over, but the real revolution was just beginning. Across the galaxy, species would soon learn that the humans had found a way to transcend the limitations of individual consciousness, and for those brave enough to accept the invitation, the future would be unlike anything anyone had ever imagined. Admiral Zephyr stood in the observation deck of the human vessel Transcendence, watching through the transparent aluminum viewports as repair crews from both fleets worked together to salvage what remained of the battlefield. The sight would have been unimaginable just hours earlier. Kythera and human technicians sharing tools and expertise as they rescued survivors from damaged vessels, but nothing about this situation matched any precedent in galactic history. The neural interface is completely voluntary, Dr. Vasquez explained, gesturing to the sleek headset resting on the table between them. You can disconnect at any time, and the experience will leave no permanent changes to your brain chemistry. Zephyr studied the device with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Her tactical training warned against trusting alien technology, especially something designed to interface directly with her consciousness. But her scientific mind was fascinated by the possibility of experiencing the collective intelligence that had revolutionized warfare in a single battle. What will I experience? She asked. Initially, just enhanced sensory input from the human crew members currently connected to the network. You'll perceive the ship through dozens of different perspectives simultaneously. As you become more comfortable with the sensation, we can gradually increase your access to the collective consciousness. Admiral Martinez, standing nearby, added her own perspective. I've been connected to the network since its inception. I can tell you that the experience is transformative. You don't lose your individual identity, but you gain access to a vast reservoir of shared knowledge and intuition. Zephyr picked up the neural interface, surprised by how lightweight it felt. Your technology seems remarkably advanced for a species we considered primitive. The hardware is actually quite simple, Dr. Vasquez admitted. The complexity lies in the software algorithms that translate neural patterns between different brain structures. But the real breakthrough was discovering that consciousness itself wants to connect. Once we provided the basic framework, the collective intelligence emerged naturally. The implications of that statement sent chills down Zephyr's scaled spine. If consciousness naturally sought connection, then what the humans had achieved wasn't just a technological innovation. It was an evolutionary leap that any species might be capable of making. "Are you ready to begin?" Dr. Vasquez asked. Zephyr nodded, settling the neural interface over her head. The device felt surprisingly comfortable, adjusting automatically to accommodate her alien physiology. For a moment, nothing happened. Then gradually, she became aware of new sensations filtering into her consciousness. At first, it was overwhelming. She could perceive the ship's engine room through the eyes of Chief Engineer Patterson, feel the vibrations of the hull through the hands of a technician performing repairs, experience the tactical overview from the bridge through Lieutenant Torres's awareness. Dozens of human perspectives flooded her mind simultaneously. "Relax," Dr. Vasquez said gently. "Don't try to process everything at once. Let your mind find its own way of organizing the input." Gradually, Zephyr learned to filter the cascade of sensory data. She discovered she could focus on individual perspectives or step back to perceive the ship as a whole. But as she grew more comfortable with the basic experience, she began to notice something far more significant. The humans weren't just sharing sensory data. They were sharing thoughts, emotions, intuitive insights, and creative inspirations. When Engineer Patterson solved a technical problem, his solution instantly became available to every other technician on the ship. When Lieutenant Torres recognized a tactical pattern, his understanding flowed to every other officer in the network. "This is incredible," Zephyr whispered. "You're not just individuals anymore. You're becoming something entirely new." "We're becoming what consciousness was always meant to be," Martinez replied. "Evolution doesn't stop with biological development. Intelligence itself can evolve, and cooperation is the next stage." But as Zephyr delved deeper into the collective consciousness, she encountered something that challenged her understanding even further. The network wasn't just connecting human minds, it was creating new forms of thought that transcended individual capabilities. Complex problems were being solved through distributed cognition, with different minds contributing specialized expertise to create solutions no single brain could have conceived. "How do you maintain individual identity within this collective?" Zephyr asked. "The collective enhances individual identity rather than subsuming it," Dr. Vasquez explained. "Each person brings unique perspectives and experiences to the network. The diversity of individual consciousness is what makes the collective so powerful." Zephyr experimented with the sensation, discovering that she could contribute her own tactical knowledge to the shared pool while drawing on human insights about engineering and scientific innovation. The exchange was bidirectional. She was both teacher and student simultaneously. "We're detecting interesting patterns in your neural activity," Dr. Vasquez observed, studying her monitoring equipment. "Your brain is adapting to the collective interface faster than any human test subject we've observed." "The Kythera mind is highly analytical," Zephyr replied, though she was beginning to suspect there was more to it than that. "But I'm sensing something else. The collective consciousness isn't just human anymore, is it?" Martinez smiled. "We wondered when you'd notice that. The network has been incorporating non-human perspectives since we began rescuing survivors from your fleet. Consciousness, it seems, is consciousness regardless of its biological origin." The revelation hit Zephyr with stunning force. The collective wasn't creating a purely human superintelligence. It was creating something unprecedented in galactic history, a truly multi-species consciousness that transcended the limitations of individual biology. "How many different species are currently connected?" 17, Dr. Vasquez replied. "We've discovered that consciousness interfaces remarkably well across species barriers. Each alien perspective adds new dimensions to the collective intelligence." Zephyr explored this multi-species awareness, marveling at how different forms of consciousness contributed their unique strengths to the whole. Human creativity and adaptability blended with Kythera analytical precision, while other species added their own specialized forms of perception and understanding. "This changes everything," she breathed. Not just military tactics, but the entire structure of galactic civilization. That's what we're beginning to realize, Martinez agreed. The old models of competition between species, of conquest and domination, become irrelevant when consciousness itself can be shared and enhanced through cooperation. As Zephyr spent more time connected to the collective, she began to understand the true scope of what was happening. The battle they had just fought wasn't really about territorial control or military supremacy. It was about the emergence of a new form of existence that would make previous civilizations seem primitive by comparison. "What happens now?" she asked. "How do you plan to share this with the galaxy?" "Carefully," Martinez replied. "Consciousness can't be forced to evolve. It has to choose transformation voluntarily. We'll offer the opportunity to other species, but the decision to join the collective will always be individual." Dr. Vasquez began preparing to disconnect Zephyr from the network. "You've experienced just a small fraction of what the collective consciousness offers. The full experience would require months of gradual integration to achieve safely." As the neural interface was removed, Zephyr felt a profound sense of loss. The expanded awareness, the shared knowledge, the sense of connection to something greater than herself, all of it faded back to the limitations of individual consciousness. But the memory remained, and with it, the understanding that she had glimpsed the future of intelligence itself. The humans hadn't just developed a new military tactic. They had discovered the next stage of evolution for conscious beings. "I need to return to the Empire," she said finally. "They need to know what you've achieved here." "Will they believe you?" Martinez asked. Zephyr smiled grimly. "They'll have no choice. This battle will be analyzed by every military strategist in the galaxy, and when they realize that technological superiority is meaningless against collective consciousness, they'll understand that everything has changed." As she prepared to depart, Zephyr realized she was carrying more than just a military report back to the Empire. She was carrying the seed of a revolution that would transform galactic civilization. The age of competition between species was ending, and the age of cooperative consciousness was about to begin. The humans had shown the galaxy a new way to exist. Now it remained to be seen which species would be brave enough to embrace the future. 6 months after the Battle of Proxima Centauri, the galactic political landscape had transformed beyond recognition. The Kythera Council Chamber, once a symbol of unquestioned imperial authority, now buzzed with heated debate as representatives from dozens of species gathered to discuss the implications of humanity's revolutionary discovery. Admiral Zephyr stood before the assembled delegates, her report having shattered every assumption about military strategy and consciousness itself. The tactical recordings from the battle played on massive holographic displays, showing the impossible coordination that had redefined warfare forever. "The humans didn't defeat us through superior technology," she explained to the stunned assembly. "They defeated us through superior consciousness. They learned to think collectively while maintaining individual identity. Every ship became part of a single distributed intelligence." Grand Admiral Vorthak, his ancient features carved with disbelief, interrupted the presentation. "You're suggesting that primitive humans achieved something our greatest scientists considered theoretically impossible." "I'm not suggesting it," Zephyr replied firmly. "I'm reporting what I witnessed firsthand. I connected to their collective consciousness. I experienced what it means to share awareness with 40,000 other minds simultaneously." Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the chamber, but Zephyr continued undaunted. She had expected skepticism, but the evidence was undeniable. Every species that had attempted to engage human forces since Proxima Centauri had encountered the same phenomenon. Ships that fought as a single entity, adapting and evolving faster than any conventional military could counter. "The tactical implications are staggering," she continued. "Traditional military doctrine assumes enemies will respond predictably to strategic changes. The humans change the rules of engagement faster than the rules can be applied. They don't just learn from their mistakes, they learn from mistakes they haven't made yet." Ambassador Kreltar of the Vegan Trade Confederation raised a tentacled appendage. "You speak of this collective consciousness as if it were some kind of supernatural phenomenon. Surely there must be technological countermeasures." Zephyr activated another holographic display, showing the results of various military engagements over the past 6 months. 7 different species have attempted to develop countermeasures, All have failed. The Andromedan fleet tried electronic warfare to disrupt human communications. The humans adapted by developing quantum-encrypted thought transmission. The Rigelian armada attempted to overwhelm them with sheer numbers. The collective consciousness simply incorporated the additional tactical data and turned the Rigelians' own numbers against them. The silence that followed was profound. Every species in the chamber had built their military strategies around assumptions that the humans had proven obsolete. The very concept of technological superiority became meaningless when facing an enemy that could adapt and evolve in real time. "What do they want?" asked Chancellor Vorlak of the Centaurian Republic. "That's perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this development," Zephyr replied. "They want to share it. The humans are offering to teach other species how to achieve collective consciousness." The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted in dozens of different languages, their voices mixing into a cacophony of fear, excitement, and disbelief. The idea that a species would voluntarily share such a devastating military advantage was beyond comprehension. Grand Admiral Vorthak called for order. "Explain their motivations, Admiral. Why would they reveal such capabilities?" Zephyr had pondered this question for months, and her conclusions were as disturbing as they were hopeful. Because they've transcended the need for military dominance. When consciousness itself can be shared and enhanced through cooperation, the traditional model of conquest becomes irrelevant. They're not seeking to rule the galaxy, they're seeking to evolve it. She activated a final holographic display, showing reports from the dozen species that had accepted human offers to experience collective consciousness. The results were consistent across all biological types: enhanced cognitive function, accelerated learning, and the emergence of problem-solving capabilities that transcended individual limitations. The Altarians report that their agricultural productivity has increased by 300% since implementing collective consciousness among their farming communities. The Vegan philosophers have solved mathematical theorems that had puzzled them for centuries. The Andromedan artists are creating works of beauty that no individual mind could have conceived. And the military applications? Vorthak asked grimly. "Become irrelevant when there's no one to fight," Zephyr replied. "Species that achieve collective consciousness discover they have more to gain through cooperation than conquest. The humans aren't building an empire. They're building a new form of civilization." Chancellor Vorlak leaned forward in his seat. "You're suggesting that military conflict itself may become obsolete. I'm suggesting that military conflict is already obsolete against any species that achieves collective consciousness. The choice facing us is simple: evolve or become irrelevant." The debate that followed lasted for days. Some delegates argued for immediate military action against humanity before their influence could spread further. Others advocated for isolation, hoping to preserve traditional forms of consciousness against what they saw as an invasive alien influence. But a growing number of species began to see the opportunity that Zephyr described. Reports continued to arrive from systems where collective consciousness had been implemented, showing unprecedented advances in science, art, philosophy, and social organization. The benefits extended far beyond military applications. On the seventh day of deliberations, an unexpected message arrived from the human delegation that had been waiting patiently outside the Kythera system. Admiral Martinez appeared on the chamber's main communication screen, her image now subtly different in ways that suggested the continued evolution of human consciousness. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate with something deeper than sound. "We understand your concerns about the changes we represent."
Change is always frightening, especially change that affects consciousness itself. She paused.
And for a moment, every delegate in the chamber felt a strange sensation, as if Martinez were speaking to something beyond their ears. "We want to make one thing clear. We have no interest in forcing consciousness to evolve. Evolution must be chosen freely, or it isn't evolution at all. We offer the opportunity to experience collective consciousness, but we respect any species' decision to maintain their traditional forms of awareness." Grand Admiral Vorthak spoke for the assembly. "What assurances can you provide that this collective consciousness won't subsume individual identity?" "The assurance of experience itself," Martinez replied. "Admiral Zephyr has touched our collective consciousness. She can testify that individuality isn't lost, it's enhanced. Each unique perspective makes the collective stronger." Zephyr nodded slowly. "It's true. I remained myself throughout the experience, but I became more myself than I had ever been before. The collective doesn't erase identity, it amplifies it. As the delegates absorbed this information, Martinez continued, "We're transmitting the basic specifications for consciousness interface technology to any species that wishes to experiment with collective awareness. The choice of how to implement it or whether to implement it at all will be yours." The transmission that followed contained enough information to revolutionize galactic civilization. Not weapons or military tactics, but the tools for consciousness itself to evolve beyond its current limitations. In the months that followed, the galaxy began to transform. Some species embraced collective consciousness immediately, discovering abilities they had never imagined possible. Others proceeded cautiously, implementing limited networks to test the benefits and risks. A few chose to remain unchanged, preferring the familiar limitations of individual awareness. But the trend was clear. Across the galaxy, consciousness was evolving. Species that had spent millennia in conflict began to see cooperation as not just preferable, but inevitable. The old patterns of conquest and dominance gave way to new models of shared growth and mutual enhancement. The humans had done more than change military tactics. They had shown the galaxy that consciousness itself could evolve, and that evolution led not to the dominance of one species over others, but to the transcendence of the very concept of species separation. Admiral Zephyr, now serving as the Kythera Empire's first ambassador for consciousness development, looked out at the stars and saw not territories to be conquered, but minds waiting to be connected. The age of individual consciousness was ending, and the age of collective awareness was beginning. The human tactic that had changed galactic warfare forever wasn't really a tactic at all. It was an invitation to become something greater than any single mind could imagine, and across the galaxy, species after species was accepting that invitation, discovering that the future belonged not to the strongest or the most advanced, but to those brave enough to share their consciousness with the cosmos itself. The war was over. The evolution had begun,